This is my e-bike battery. I charge it in my house all the time. In fact, usually right over there. But I've had family friends reach out to me telling me I'm crazy and I should be way more concerned about this thing exploding, starting a fire, and destroying my property. The thing is, I'm not concerned at all, but I don't blame these friends for having these thoughts. The way that the media treats e-bike batteries and e-bikes would really lead anyone to think that, especially because the media always conveniently leaves out one particular piece of information, usually on purpose. Let me show you what I mean. The other day, I came across this article. The cost of damages paid out to people injured in the UK by e-scooters and e-bikes has topped 110 million pounds, the BBC has learned. Anything stand out as odd to you in this BBC headline? I was at a pub quiz the other day with an economics YouTuber, and we got into the topic of cycling. You see, he cycles in London all the time, so do I. Thought that was pretty cool. But on the topic of e-bikes, he suddenly became very passionate. He said all e-bikes should be illegal. He sees the e-bikes passing him all the time at crazy speeds with the throttles, the Deliveroo drivers and such, and says the government should really make them all illegal. That's when I told him what he was seeing already was illegal, and those aren't really e-bikes. He found that hard to believe, but I really don't blame him. My home state in New Jersey, for instance, recently passed a law requiring a license and registration for any form of e-bike, thus ensuring the state maintain its ever-worsening reliance on motor vehicles. All of these things are connected. The issue here is that nobody seems to have any idea what an e-bike actually is across many countries, and the media really is to blame. So what exactly is going on here? My name is Edinger, and I've only been riding an e-bike for the past 2 years or so, and there is quite a glaring problem with e-bikes that the media don't seem to be reporting on, so hopefully this video clears a few things up. This article is a really good place to start because articles like this very recent one from the BBC are currently the biggest issue with how e-bikes are discussed in the media because this is purposefully misleading. The cost of damages paid out to people injured in the UK by e-scooters and e-bikes has topped 110 million pounds. The BBC has learned. The BBC haven't really learned though, have they? Without even diving into this article, you might already be able to see the issues presented in the headline itself if you understand how UK insurance works. Let's say you're driving a car and you get involved in an accident, and the other driver is at fault. What usually happens is you exchange information, your insurance, and their insurance provider pays for your damages. And if you're the one at fault, it goes the other direction. But when you get in an accident and it turns out the other driver wasn't insured, they were driving without insurance at all, what happens then? The UK actually have a solution to that. It's called the Motor Insurers Bureau. Basically, if someone was driving uninsured, this bureau steps in and pays what needs to be fixed. That sounds great, right? But there is an important word there in the Motor Insurers Bureau. Motor, because this is only in a collision between two motor vehicles. So just on that alone, how could 110 million pounds have been paid out due to e-bikes when, according to UK law, e-bikes that are legal, as in a pedelec style e-bike that maxes out at 250 watts and goes a maximum of 25 kilometers an hour until the motor cuts out, those are classified as bicycles. In order for them to actually receive a payout, it would have to be something classed as a motor vehicle, aka an illegal e-motorcycle. But the BBC doesn't really care about that. They'd rather get the headlines and get you to click because, oh my God, e-bikes are very, very scawy. Oh my God, look at all these payouts from e-bikes, even though not 1 pound of the 110 million pound payout was done because of a legal e-bike. I saw an article recently where a Labour MP had to come out and be like, hey, BBC, this is actually like disinformation. What are you doing? You should correct the record. As of the recording of this video, doesn't seem they're doing that, but they're just one piece of the puzzle. In case you're someone that has a life and doesn't know the different specifications for e-bikes, in the UK, EU, and many of the countries, they have different classes for different styles of e-bikes based on what they can do. In the UK in particular, an e-bike is a pedal-powered e-bike in which the motor is only powered once it recognizes pedal power being pushed through, and the maximum it can ever go to is 250 watts of power, and once the motor reaches 25 kilometers an hour, that's it, the motor cuts off. You can possibly power the bike to go faster than that. You're going down a hill or maybe just really strong. You can get maybe 36, 37 kilometers an hour if you're really, really, really pushing it. I don't know, I'm not an Olympic athlete, so I rarely do that. Most people with e-bikes just hit that 25 kilometer an hour speed limit and they safely cycle to where they need to go. An illegal e-bike is pretty much anything that goes above that. The US is currently plagued with a huge amount of these because the amount of man-babies that like to drive their motorcycles that they like to pretend are e-bikes. They don't have pedals, they look like motorcycles, they like to ride them on public roads, or worse, on the sidewalks and pavements, becoming a nuisance to pedestrians. Especially because the ones in the US, they can go like 40, 50 miles an hour, which is, yes, incredibly dangerous for a vehicle that shares paths with pedestrians. There's a reason why we have roads for cars and sidewalks for pedestrians, though, to be fair, A lot of US states don't even have sidewalks. So, the big issue in this case is confusing the difference between a safe and legal e-bike and an illegal modified e-motorcycle. And this isn't the only time you'll be hearing about this. For instance, look at this article that came out from the BBC this week. Oh no, it's very scary. You see, it says right here that watch, there's going to be an e-bike battery exploding in a recycling center. This is a real issue. According to the London Fire Brigade, there is a fire caused by a battery in an e-bike or an e-scooter every 2 days just in London. That sounds really scary. And I, without knowing any better, immediately read this article and thought, well, why haven't the UK and other countries having these issues made the dangerous, cheap batteries that are causing all these fires illegal? My current e-bike uses a Bosch motor and a Bosch battery. This is a premium motor and battery system though, and it has a lot of safety features built in naturally. It's got a battery management system, and if the sensors detect that the temperature is too high or too low, it immediately cuts itself off from power to prevent any issue. That's on the bike and also when charging. It also goes through a rigorous testing system to make sure all the lithium cells are safe. So I was thinking, well, they should really just ban the cheap and dangerous ones without all these features and just make sure that, well, these features come standard. Turns out they don't need to do that. They literally already have. The UK and EU already have a regulatory body on this sort of thing, and these safety features that I thought, oh, they're the premium parts of my e-bike, they're not premium or optional at all. They're literally legally required. But then why is there such a huge gap? Why is there a gap between the amount of fires we're seeing and the amount of legal e-bikes on the street? Well, because every single one of these is linked to an illegally modded e-motorcycle. Are you picking this up yet? And here I was thinking, well, why don't they just penalize and fine the companies that are selling these illegal batteries? That should do it, right? Well, they do. It's just chump change for the company, so it's just kind of the cost of business for them. Selling an unsafe lithium battery on Alibaba, Amazon, and the like, well, that is a criminal offense under the General Product Safety Regulations of 2005. It's just that, the penalty doesn't really deter anyone. The max fine on indictment is £20,000 if they get indicted. So a seller pushing loads and loads, thousands of these e-bike batteries, they're making, hand over fist, hundreds of thousands of pounds. Oh, so £20,000? Cool, cost of doing business. Doesn't matter how many deaths, fires, or anything this may cause. The problem inherent here is that a lot of Western markets have been flooded with these illegal batteries from China, sometimes with the certification sticker from EU or UK markets just slapped on in, pretending it's legal. Parliament has had a law on their desk making these marketplaces themselves liable, as in Amazon and Alibaba, not just the individual sellers. They've had that law on their desk since 2025, and they've yet to finish writing it up. The London Fire Brigade has recently, as of January, told them to please hurry up so we can stop, having fires and lots of deaths in the cities. But hey, they did just recently make it so that kids can't watch YouTube, so I'm glad Parliament has their priorities in order. There most definitely is a problem at the moment with one particular type of e-bike, those that are part of the e-bike sharing program, mainly Lime bikes. Pedestrians are quick to point out that these things can absolutely cover the pavements, the sidewalks, they block access. You got wheelchair users that can't use the pavements because there's e-bikes everywhere. That's not great, right? You can argue that, well, way more space in the city is taken up by cars and car infrastructure, and that compared to injuries that are involving cars, injuries between bikes and pedestrians are negligibly small. But that's just a whataboutism that cyclists use as a way to not think critically about the fact that we do have a problem here. There is a real issue. All of us are pedestrians. We all live in walkable cities, hopefully. And these rideshare e-bikes are a great tool that does help get people to where they need to go faster and more efficiently. But they shouldn't be blocking everyone else when they need to get around. Whenever I've used a Lime bike, at the end of my ride, I have to take a photo of the bike parked appropriately out of the footpath or they won't let me go. But the system doesn't always work very well, as you could probably tell. And from the huge amounts of them in certain places, there must be a different problem here, right? Westminster Council have recently seen this large uptick in Lime bike users in the borough and have seen the symptom of the bigger problem and have recently decided to gather up all the Lime bikes in a van and then take them to a depot where they then charge the companies for, well, putting them all over the place. I know some of you might be cheering for that result. I mean, hey, they're actually doing something about this. They're getting those off the street and they're charging the companies. And you know what? I'm kind of cheering with you, but also not at the same time. Because the problem here is that they're solving a problem at the end of the pipeline rather than the beginning. Why do you think there's such a huge amount of Lime bikes all over the place recently in specific spots? Well, there seems to be a huge demand for them. And why do you keep seeing them in places that they shouldn't be? Because there aren't many places where they can be. Clearly, we have an issue at the moment where all we really need is parking places for the bikes. Bikes do not take up much space. They do not need much space to be parked. Give them more designated parking places and they won't wind up all over the pavement as often. Or at least you can then charge the individual users, and that should be something we're all on board with. Bikes shouldn't be blocking the pavement, end of story. And bikes should also have a safe place to be put. so that way they're not on the pavement. As I mentioned in my previous video on cycling in London, the Lime bikes do have a major problem. They're incredibly heavy, the major design that you see in the streets, and the thing is, their brakes are almost always broken on them. They're unsafe for a lot of people. And so when you see an article that says a woman was left severely injured by a 10-year-old that hit her with an e-bike, I think we can all agree something is very wrong here, right? To those that use bikes to get around in any way within a city, you probably already know a lot of this stuff. The issue is you've got roads designed for cars, you've got pavement designed for people, and a lot of times, especially because a lot of the network doesn't have cycle lanes, bikes have to share with one of these two groups. And when they share with motor vehicles, it gets very scary. And when you share with pedestrians, it gets very scary for the pedestrians when you have those illegal e-bikes that are blasting past you all the time. Usually, if you have a safe e-bike, you are just a considerate cyclist. You slow down when you pass pedestrians. That's standard. As a pedestrian, I'd be hoping that you'd be more on board with more cycle lanes, because that means there'll be way fewer shared paths where cycles have to share the route with pedestrians. And like I said, I find that these are mostly fine because as a considerate cyclist, anytime I have to share a path with pedestrians, I slow down. I make sure I give them a lot of space. I'm not a dick. Turns out I see all the time. Usually, yet again, it is people on illegal e-motorcycles that just have the throttle on and they just zip past people, they make people feel scared, and that is giving a bad name to everyone with legal e-bikes, which is the issue because no news article seems to care about the distinction here. So most every story you see about e-bikes at the moment misinforms the public as a feature. One of my favorite articles that I've read recently was actually one from The Telegraph because of how hilarious it was. I spent the first 5 minutes reading this article in constant awe, waiting for the part where they revealed this was just a bit, it was meant to be some sort of obvious satire, but then I got to the end and realized this was a serious article in a published newspaper in the UK. So I'd like to go through some of my favorite parts with you to show you just how room temperature IQ you'd have to be to take this article and its writer seriously. I know that there's going to be a lot of people in my comments going, well, what do you expect? You're reading the Telegraph. I know that. So to start off, the main subject of this article is Cycling Mikey. And for those of you at Lives, Cycling Mikey is a cycle influencer in London that goes around on the streets and he records with his GoPro whenever he sees drivers distracted looking at their phones and whatnot when at stoplights or on the road. And the thing is, they are breaking the law. They are making everyone's lives in London less safe. The amount of times I've seen a light turn green and a driver just has not gone, and eventually they look up from their phones and they gun it, there could be a vulnerable road user. This is how people get injured. So Cycling Mikey is essentially some sort of vigilante. However, he doesn't just do this for the goodwill of it. He's not just reporting to the police to keep London safer. He makes content out of it. And a lot of the content involves people being very angry, shouting, there's violence involved, and that's kind of why a lot of people watch this. And then people get really angry both at cyclists in general because of his image and also at, well, there's a lot of people breaking the law by looking at their phones in London. So like I said, I'm not necessarily on board with this Mikey character and how he goes about business. However, The Telegraph, oh my God. So The Telegraph stance here is, in a drive to fund the country's crumbling infrastructure, local authorities have been targeting motorists by imposing punitive fines for minor infractions. So even though I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of this influencer, The Telegraph have made me on his side here because for the most part, if you boil it down to one thing, it is these people are breaking the law. He is reporting to the police. He's actually, even if you disagree with him, making the streets a bit safer, right? That's just the way it is. But let's see how the Telegraph is reporting on this. They say, this entitled busybody is just one of a growing army of cyclists armed with those unpleasant floating cameras. Yeah, unpleasant floating cameras. It's called AI, actually. Unpleasant floating cameras. And a healthy obsession for minding other people's business. The impact on motorists has been huge. Supporters argue that citizen policing is a necessary civic duty that forces drivers to stay vigilant, changes bad behavior, and ultimately saves lives. But a growing backlash from harried drivers has led to severe retaliations, including online abuse, physical violence, and legal reprisals. So essentially their point here is, you know, people might say that this is saving lives, but reporting the drivers breaking the law makes the drivers angry, and then abuse happens. Okay, I'm trying to process that a bit. It's getting ugly out there, but instead of warning cyclists against taking matters into their own hands, wait. Drivers breaking the law, so we need to warn the cyclists to stop reporting people breaking the law. This is my favorite part of the article because it's getting ugly out there, guys. Instead of warning cyclists against taking matters in their own hands, guys, this is essentially like an escalation that would lead to a kangaroo court, a mob rule, and spiraling cycles of retaliation, as with the notorious Nicaraguan barrio gangs of the 1990s and 2000s. So essentially, by a very small number of cyclists reporting motorists that are driving unsafely and thus make all of us safer, We're essentially nearly a mob rule, like the barrio gangs of the 1990s in Nicaragua. The reach here is genuinely some beautiful piece of art that I don't think people are appreciating enough. At one point, they're saying that the cops are understaffed. They don't have enough people to police the streets, and that's what's causing these cyclists to need to do this. But then they make some sort of like old man yells at cloud, like argument that, well, the police used to be a force, and then they changed it to a service. In this next part of the article, I really want to point out, in case you're unaware of this common thing that every newspaper in the UK does. Left, right, they do it in the US as well. Basically, even if the topic that's being written about has nothing to do with anything political in the slightest, you need to signal to the reader that you're on their side. You're in their gang. We got to push you into camps, even if there's no camps involved. Drivers that are driving badly and causing people to die and be injured are bad, right? Well, no, actually, because the police should act now before armies of camera-wielding snitches start coming after anyone else they deem to be beyond the pale. Reform voters, perhaps, or climate deniers. Word for, yeah, you guys with us, right? They're gonna be coming after us next. What? Coming after us? Coming after me and Nigel? Cyclists reporting people breaking the law. What's next? Sharia law? They're gonna come for climate deniers. Why? You shouldn't be denying the climate change is real. I mean, we've literally had 20 straight days of over 30 degrees or something like that. It's just normal life, actually. And then, as every slanted article needs to do, you need to condense all of this signaling and everything that you've just kind of thrown at the viewer, hoping that they didn't actually process. You gotta give them some sort of call to action, something that they think of at the very end, which is, yeah, that's why the bikes and scooters should be licensed and registered. Yes, that's the problem. Drivers driving unsafely, looking at their phones, people reporting them. It means that cyclists should also have licenses and registration. If you think about things as you read them, you probably wouldn't be reading things like the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, but people aren't thinking when they read these articles. That's why they're reading these articles. Oh, everything's a bit partisan. The thing is, listen, the BBC, the Independent, the Guardian, they're all the same when it comes to purposefully using misinformation. Obviously, on one end of the spectrum, you have these hilarious ones from the Telegraph and the like, but the issue remains the same. Forms of transportation shouldn't be politicized or vilified. That wouldn't make sense, though. That wouldn't sell enough newspapers. We need to make sure that if a battery explodes in a recycling plant, we label it e-bike. And if there's 110 million pounds of illegal e-motorcycle issues, well, let's just call them e-bikes, because that'll get us clicks, and it allows us to put everybody into camps, even though e-bikes are just a form of transportation. Anyway, I just heard the US just made bike lanes DEI. Yeah, they are inclusive. Anyone can use them. Darn those bike lanes! There are enough problems in society. We don't need to make things up about forms of transport just because you're not used to them. On a personal note, pretty much every single person that I've introduced an e-bike to, as in I cycled with them somewhere around London or somewhere else, immediately understood the value to them, and they either started cycling more regularly or they really wanted to. When you ride on one and you use it as a commuting tool to get around, you just realize immediately it removes all the barriers that cycling has. And if your city has safe enough lanes to get around, then it just becomes one of those no-brainers where you're like, oh, we should be prioritizing this more for that middle ground, when taking a train is for longer distances, and then walking is for shorter distances, and then cycling is that really nice in between. You can use everything. I just want to say, it's totally okay if you aren't a fan of e-bikes. If you haven't ridden one, I feel like that's like saying, oh, I really hate Twilight. Have you read it? No. Have you seen it? No. Just don't like it. It just comes off as a bit closed-minded, right? I read Twilight. Then I said, well, it's a really shit book. But I'm not going to judge a form of transport if I haven't tried it, right? At the end of the day, I just hope that you make a more informed decision about the things you like and you dislike. So hopefully, if you watch this video and someone says something to you about e-bike batteries or e-bikes in general, well, you're more informed to correct them. Okay, so the media might not know the difference between an e-bike and an illegal e-motorcycle, but, well, the police should know the difference, right? Right? This is my current e-bike. It's from a brand called Turn. It's a very popular model of e-bike in this country. Fully legal. They go through a lot of rigorous testing to make sure they hit all the safety standards to be able to legally meet the definition of an e-bike in this country. Their most popular line in the UK, I'm fairly certain, is the GSD. It's a cargo bike. You haul kids on it, you haul like cargo with it. Earlier this year, a man in Birmingham had his GSD taken from him by police, who performed some faulty tests, determined that the bike was illegal, and then destroyed it. Now, funny enough, that bike cost him £6,000. Or it didn't really cost him as much as it cost the city of Birmingham, because the council actually has a plan where they help fund people and businesses to get e-bikes so that there's fewer cars in the street. It's a way to reduce pollution. So Birmingham police destroyed an e-bike funded through council. It's insane. So first off, they lifted the back wheel of the e-bike off the ground and then decided to start pedaling. Now, this doesn't have any friction on it from being on the ground anymore, and so using your hands, you can easily get the speedometer to read any numbers past 25 kilometers an hour. But that's not actually what's important. What's important is, when does the motor cut out? Legally speaking, as soon as it hits 25 kilometers an hour, that's when this guy stops outputting power. But the police, for some reason, the ones enforcing the law and literally destroying e-bikes, don't seem to know the difference. And so they just went, number got too big. I'm sorry, gonna have to throw this one away. And despite the fact that the man knew the law and was trying to educate the police don't want to listen. Sorry, take it up with, sorry, we already destroyed it. That's just insane. This is such basic information that it is startling that the police of Birmingham did not, one, have the ability to just quickly look up, hey, is this a standard model of e-bike that normally is legal in the UK? Yes, sure, you can actually hack these, by the way. There are things for this specific bike, for instance, that I could purchase on, I guess, the darknet, I don't know, something like that. And you basically take off the cover here, you wire something in, and it will trick the motor into thinking it's going slower, which allows you to go over the legal limit. Now, this is very illegal, and in fact, Bosch, the company that makes this e-bike motor, and they make pretty much all the motors for this brand, they have many ways of preventing this from happening. They're constantly doing checks to make sure that everything is as is. And if anyone has done anything to mess with the software, they immediately throttle down the speed to the lowest possible speed until the person that owns the bike goes into a specialist to fix it. But knowing that sort of thing would require, well, knowing something. And it seems like the Birmingham police don't actually do that. They just like to perform the gesture to the public. Look, we're cleaning up that problem you've been complaining about. We think we're just kind of picking up random e-bikes and going, yeah, I guess that's how it works. We throw that one away. It's just crazy to me because I cycle in London all the time, and I could probably count to 10 within about 5 minutes the amount of illegal e-bikes I see on the roads. They're very easy to spot. You just see a normal bike where some guy has jerry-rigged up some battery with wires and tries to hook it up to a hub motor. It really doesn't put faith in the system, right? If the media doesn't know the difference, the police are so stupid they don't even admit fault when they make a mistake. And this is why it's such a big problem when the BBC and all these other media organizations can't tell the difference, because they're misinforming the public, including, sadly, the fucking police.
Oh, look, he's going so fast. He's such a fast boy.
Anyway, I've just come back from the most awful week-long cough of my life. I've never had just a cough before, but it took my voice for 3 or 4 days. I've heard it happen to a lot of people in London, so if you've also gone through this, hopefully you're getting better soon. Hopefully I'll be back to my standard programming next week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Sunday. Goodbye.